trapped in the cage, aren't you? Well, lucky for you, this video is going to be your North Star to freedom. All seen the meme where it's the jazz guitarist and it's one chord change and he's playing like 9 different voicings for that. CAGED is problematic on multiple levels right there. One is playing those kinds of like open string chords. That is super hard to play rhythmically. Like try to play this 5-1. You know what I'm saying? It's not easy, dude. It's ugly. Am I the only one who can't do it? Come on, this is super inconvenient. But by comparison, you could play that 5-1 like this. Or like this. Or like this. Or like this. Or like this. The fundamental issue with CAGED is very simple. It's a principle that is only relevant to the fretboard of the guitar, so it's not relevant to the fundamental first principles of harmony. So it literally cages you on the fretboard. Like you might know that good old C add 9 shape, but you don't know why it's C add 9. And you can't alter that voicing to get like C minor 9, for example. Or C7 sharp 9. And actually, CAGED is relevant in that side, because once you understand the first principles of harmony, then you can go back to CAGED and literally just alter those shapes according to whatever chord quality you want. Unless, of course, you're trapped in the cage. The thing with having a masterful awareness of chord voicings, then you can use chords rhythmically, and that's where the game changes. That's kind of when you break open that piano level. Because think about what the great pianists are doing. They're playing tons of rich chords extremely rhythmically. Like literally like 10 voicings for one chord, at least. So at that point, I've completely destroyed CAGED and I've rendered it useless. But the fact is, I actually use it all the time. Dynamite! We do like the open string element that's afforded by this CAGED way of thinking. Absolutely, and we talked about in the last video, you know, these have their place, but notice what the difference is, right? We're talking about stuff like, right, this kind of picking, you know what I mean? That rhythmic Adam Jones flat picking. That's actually where CAGED is actually very, very useful right there. But honestly, this video is not about the good side of CAGED, it's actually about the bad side of CAGED. If you want to see the good side, check out the last video I made. That made huge use of the CAGED system. But in this video, we're gonna be throwing rocks at the CAGED system. Because the problem with the CAGED system is that its logic only applies to the fretboard, and therefore it doesn't account for the vast array of possibilities in the 12-tone system. So you can definitely think of CAGED as a first principle of guitar. However, it doesn't show us how music works. But now you see the full circle though. You see how you full circle back to CAGED. That's what my last video is about. I've actually been going down that trip, like starting to rep like campfire chords, like straight up. Just showing how that happens in rock, like naturally. Huge opportunity in the CAGED system. But you know where it breaks down? Breaks down real hard in that jazz, that gospel, that more complex harmonic world where you actually want these like juicier voicings. You want these voicings to have a little bit more funk to them. And I will remind you, that's that Miles Davis, read his auto, right? He's talking about that. He's talking about that funk, what funk actually means. Like, this is not funk, but this is funk. It's that Miles Davis, dude. He explains what actual funk is. So that's kind of what we're talking about, this duality here, right? So that CAGED system is not funky. Opposite of funk. This is not funk. And obviously nothing against that. I use that sound all the time. Definitely use it more than like any other jazz-informed guitarist you'll find anywhere, I'll tell you that much. But the way that I think about harmony from a fundamental level, it's not rooted in that caged open string approach. It's rooted in another system that we're going to talk about in this video. But first, we're gonna throw more rocks at the CAGED system. The major issue of CAGED is how it prevents you from learning actual harmony. It's only guitar-related harmony. It's not showing you first principles of harmony. When you understand first principles of harmony, then you full circle back to CAGED and you're like, okay, because of like the full circle elegance of the universe shining through right there. You know what I'm saying, dude? And now you see, the only way to experience that elegance is by understanding first principles of harmony at large. Then we're gonna come back to CAGED and see how that fits together. That's literally everything in that last video that I made. So now I'm showing the flip side of that whole principle, which is the funk, dude. The Miles Davis autobiography is like, yeah, like these mofos show up here eating pig feet sandwiches. How do you think that smells? And honestly, if you want to understand like actually what jazz is actually about, just read the Miles Davis autobiography. I'm pretty sure it's the Bible of jazz. Okay, like you can quote me on that. Straight up. Like I will take credit for saying that the Miles Davis autobiography is the Bible of jazz. There's no other way to put it. It's verses in there, straight up. But it ties into this, right? Because you think Miles is gonna tell you to play that? No, dude. He's gonna tell you to play at least that. And that's what Herbie was literally doing. Like, he was literally playing like C7 sharp 9 fat shape 2. And actually, let's look at this in actual context to really see what I mean, because you can't play these caged chord voicings with any kind of rhythmic momentum. They're too hard to play. So if we want to be fluent in our chordal ability, we have to look for easier options. So put it in context, okay? We're going to talk about doing rhythmic comping underneath what we're playing melodically, right? This idea. Now those were virtually all fat shapes. This is the one that wasn't, this one. That's not a fat shape. And it's important to distinguish this as not a fat shape, because what you'll realize very quickly is that there's only two types of chord voicings. There's fat shapes and there's not fat shapes. So this is not a fat shape. But watch how it turns into fat shapes. Right? So what do you notice right on the surface is like this whole idea. Super incredibly easy to play. So can I add melody on top of it? Of course I can. And I know you're starting to see. You're starting to see why we've got to learn this stuff, right? But here's the challenge. You can be aware of the three primary fat shapes. You probably already are aware of them. You've seen this before, right? That's what's hilarious about it. But do you understand all the ways that that can be applied? That's fat shape 1. That's one of the most important interval combinations in all music. Because what you have to understand is fat shapes are actually a musically universal principle, but they just happen to be an extremely elegant solution to voicings on the guitar. And that's why it goes back to that age-old argument. It's just like, where did the fat shapes come from? Like, I don't know who played the first fat shape. For sure, we hear it on McCoy Tyner all day long. You definitely hear it, Joe Pass. Right? Those are fat shapes. Those are expanded fat shapes, but that's part of the paradigm. The three primary fat shapes are 3-note voicings, but they expand into an unlimited number of voicings and applications. And what's mind-blowing is when I'm working on this stuff with my students and they're seeing applications that I haven't thought of. And it's like, oh, dude, are you a phony? It's like, no, that's how deep this stuff runs. And actually, that's what we're gonna get into in this video. Like how cosmically hilarious some of this stuff is. And I'm even gonna show you the way that we actually work on this stuff in the school. So you're gonna get a sneak peek into the methodology that we've been using that's absolutely freaking transformative. In terms of like, one day you're not fluent in music, the next day you're fluent on the highest level, and you're able to integrate frameworks on top of that fluency. Fat Shapes is an example of that. Fat Shapes is just something that lives on top of a comprehensive understanding of music theory. And that's what I'm saying is my students are blowing my mind because they understand all the ways that they can apply Fat Shapes, and they're thinking of conclusions I haven't thought of, which makes complete sense. That just shows that they're really understanding the way this stuff works. I'll give you the smallest example as a foreshadowing because I don't want to give away the punchline on this. It's just too good. I'm gonna like lose my mind if I overthink this right now. I'll lose my mind later. You know how I like to lose my mind on camera? I'll set that up in a minute. But just think about this voicing as an example, right? This is an E7 altered chord. That sound. But that's a perfect altered dominant chord, and I'm just playing Fat Shape 2 off of the 5th, and the notes it's giving me are 5, flat 9, and sharp 11, dude. And I realize that's actually technically not altered because it's got the natural 5 in it, but like the juxtaposition of the natural 5 against the sharp 11 in a voicing, I'm gonna show you guys this stuff. I'm gonna show you in the context of just the two of us how a voicing like that would actually naturally occur. Right? Because it seems like, oh, you're just being like a total psycho. Why would you play that voicing like that? Well, this kind of stuff shows up naturally when we account for voice leading. So we're gonna get into that in the MIDI because that's actually where this stuff becomes very clear very quickly, and that's one of our secret methodologies of turbo boosting, is leveraging the technology, dude, which is the MIDI. Which ironically I think is probably like a first principle of like human awareness. And that's why I think it works so well in learning if you're thinking about it properly. So I'm gonna show you a way to think about MIDI that you've never thought about by showing you how to use Fat Shapes in context, what that sounds like and what kind of results come from doing that. But before any of that's gonna make sense, you're going to have to understand chord construction. All right, so to master chord construction, you're gonna need to come over here in the school. You're gonna have to take the chord construction course, okay? So you see, we've got a lot of curriculums here, but the chord construction course is for sure where everyone's gotta start because this is actually where you're gonna understand those first principles of harmony. So let's take a look at the first module here. Chords are built by stacking thirds on top of a root. Right? Maybe you've heard that before. Maybe you haven't. Either way, this course is going to get you crystal clear on first principles of harmony. I'm talking crystal clear, right? We're going to use the number system to provide us formulas here for each chord quality, right? So like the formula for the major 7 chord quality is 1, 3, 5, 7, right? So this is easy stuff, right? Super easy stuff. But this is just meant to get you that really solid foundation with harmony before we move into applied harmony, aka Fat Shapes. Because the hang up that I keep seeing with students is like people come to me all the time like, yeah, I know scales, I know the number system, I know how chords are built, but they're still looking for instruction because they can't make music with that, right? So making music with that theory is essentially applied harmony, and there is a system for applying the harmony. So once you complete chord construction, right, you get through all these 10 modules, right? Look at this, we get into the extensions. The extensions are super important here because we're gonna use those extensions in the context of applied harmony, in the context of Fat Shapes. The extensions are extremely important. And then once we get through here, the second course is Fat Shapes, right? And what's great about all of these curriculums is that I'm not the only one who wrote them. Like the faculty work together to write these. So these are bulletproof, right? Because they've got the perspective of multiple people who are all at a master level understanding of music and fluency of music. So the faculty agreed that it would be important to actually have the first module in Fat Shapes be the fundamentals of chord inversion, right? Just on a triadic level. And you can understand pretty quickly that if we're only dealing with triads, every triad has 3 possible inversions, right? Root position, first inversion, second inversion. That's hugely relevant to when we actually start using Fat Shapes, which are entirely based on a comprehensive understanding of inversions all the way up to extensions, where you're getting the third inversion, fourth inversion, and fifth inversion in some cases. What you'll see in this course, which is really great, is we've got literally like the diagrams, right? Emil absolutely crushing this, right? Setting us up with the whole diagram level. Really, really great stuff here. And really these diagrams are just kind of showing you the versatility of fat shapes, because the whole idea is that when you understand fat shapes and you're fluent in that principle, then you can apply the 3 primary fat shapes to literally any chord quality you want. And that's what I'm going to show you in the next part of this video. All right, so this is where I'm actually going to really peel back the curtain here and show you the power of fat shapes. Okay, so this is going to be freaking mind-blowing if you can wrap your head around it. Which you probably can, but you won't really understand how you could make these decisions on your own. You would have to go through the chord construction course to really get the full understanding there, and I can help you with that, right? We can get you super clear on all that stuff, but let's just kind of reverse engineer the results here. So one of the tunes that we use in the school in chord construction is Just the Two of Us. Really classic, absolute all-time banger. A very ubiquitous harmonic sequence. It's also very short, so that's really helpful in terms of just understanding form, right? We want to start with short forms and expand to longer forms. So Just the Two of Us has got that short form. It's got that absolutely crushing harmonic sequence. So using that tune as context for the applied harmony is going to be absolutely crucial, because none of this stuff makes sense without context. And that's honestly why a lot of people know theory, but they don't really know how to apply it, because they didn't learn theory with the goal of applying it. And right there is honestly a huge insight into why our program is so effective, is because we're just doing results-oriented learning. We're doing theory at the master's level, but it's based in actual musical performance. It's not staying abstract ever. Right out of the gate in the chord construction curriculum, we're already talking about how this applies to Just the Two of Us, and that's that first tune that everyone really unlocks the fluency on. So let's look at that, right? In the MIDI. Now, the MIDI is game changer. This is where you actually understand the full paradigm of creation itself. Without the MIDI, you can be practicing this stuff, and it's like you're building a sandcastle while the tide is coming in. You know what I mean? Like with MIDI, you can really engrave your ideas, you can solidify those ideas, and very quickly, like immediately, you can start translating all of these ideas onto the guitar. And I'm going to show you how that's done in just a second. But first, let's just listen to what we've got so far on Just the Two of Us using only fat shapes. I'll play the first 2 measures. Proof is in the pudding every time. So level 1 is you hear the harmony of Just the Two of Us, right? Crystal clear, right? But let's take a look at some of these voicings, which are all fat shapes, right? So look at this. First voicing we've got here, fat shape 1, starting on the major 7th, okay? Rules to live by. For a major 7 chord, you can have fat shape 1 starting on the major 7th, you can have fat shape 1 starting on the major 3rd, and you can have fat shape 1 starting on the major 2nd, right? And you get 3 juicy voicings, all used in conjunction to really get the sound of that D flat major 7, right? We're just doing the old 2-3 stuff, right? We got 2-3-3, and then over here we got 3-2-3, and over here we got 3-3-2, right? And we're really just using that because as a goal with the fat shapes, I always tell the students that we want to be able to have at least 3 chord voicings for each chord. So that aligns perfectly with the 3-3-2 framework. So for each chord, we're just getting 3 voicings here, right? 3 voicings for D flat major 7, 3 voicings for C altered. So let's look at this C altered chord, because we see for that D flat major 7, we got fat shape 1 used 3 times, right? So what's going on for the C altered? What's this? We've got E natural, the major 3rd, B flat, the flat at 7th, D sharp, the sharp 9. That's fat shape 2. Okay, now notice the convenience of fat shape 2 on the fretboard, right? In the same way, notice the convenience of fat shape 1 on the fretboard. Fat shape 1 in 3 locations, all giving us that sound of D flat major 7, and then we transition with a really nice voice leading transition here, right? Look how fat shape 1 off of the 9th degree of D flat major perfectly sets up fat shape 2 off of the 3rd degree of a C7 altered chord. So then what happens here? The next chord that we're playing for that C7 sound is F sharp, we see C natural, and we see E. So we see sharp 4, 1, and 3. What is that? That is fat shape 3. So we see fat shape 3 off of the sharp 4th degree of an altered dominant chord is giving us the perfect sound of that altered dominant chord with the sharp 11, the 1, and the 3rd. So notice how fat shape 2 off the major 3rd in conjunction with fat shape 3 off the sharp 4 is giving us all those great altered dominant tones, right? So what's the last voicing we've got here? We've got a G natural, we've got a D flat, and we've got an F sharp. I love this voice. This one's hilarious, right? So that's fat shape 2 starting off the 5th. So we see fat shape 2 starting off the 5th gives us 5, flat 9, sharp 11, right? And now these 3 voicings together give us that sound of the C7 altered that is going to resolve up a 4th to F minor, right? And we just hear it, right? You can really hear the sound of that juicy C7. Those are just like clouds coming in, right? It's so nice. And you get that resolution, right? So how's the resolution happening? So this is just beautiful what happens right here. We see that fat shape 2 in this case beautifully leads us to this F minor sound. So what's the F minor sound? We've got flat 3, natural 5, and 1. So that's not a fat shape. That's just an F minor triad in first inversion. The takeaway here is look how beautifully the fat shape voice leads to that perfect minor triad in first inversion. This is one thing we see with the fat shape phenomenon is it sets us up for success. The voice leading opportunities afforded by the fat shapes are so elegant that it can bring a freaking tear to your eye. I'm not even kidding. And that really just corroborates the relevance of fat shapes. It's like, the question is like, why are we using fat shapes? Well, for one, because the voice leading opportunities are immaculate. And if we start with fat shapes, we may voice lead out of fat shapes, but we inevitably return back to fat shapes through voice leading. And we can see that here, right? So we see this beautiful F minor triad. And then where does that F minor triad move to? It literally just moves to fat shape 1 off of the 1 of that chord, right? So this is F, B flat, E flat. That's fat shape 1. Together, these are giving us the sound of F minor 11, F minor 7 at 11 type sounds, right? Right, you hear that? It's like, oh, nice and consonant. Like you hear that triad really establishing that F minor sound, and then it's like, okay, well, let's venture away from just the triad, and then we get to that fat shape 1 right here. We hear that in conjunction. It's dynamite, right? And then what's this? So this is just fat shape 1 starting on the 2nd degree, right? So we got fat shape 1 on the 1st degree, fat shape 1 on the 2nd degree, all just giving us the sounds of F minor. And so we see the F minor triad just takes us right back to good old fat shapes. Now what happens next? Right, we get that E flat minor 7 to that A flat 7. So what's going on for E flat minor 7 here? Well, F minor fat shape 1 off the 2nd degree is taking us to E flat minor 7, but it's fat shape 1 off of the 2nd degree. So that's giving us 9, 5, and 1, right? But then the 9 goes up a half step to the major 3rd, and you kind of get those like John Frusciante type movements happening within the fat shapes, right? Just the inner movements. You see the same thing here, right? You can always do that. The fat shapes set you up a lot of time to move inner voices, and we see that right here. So this is kind of nice just here. You know what I mean? It's just more motion, and it's the same reason that we use 3 different voicings for any of these chords, right? It's just more motion in your chord voicing, which allows you to play more rhythmically, right? Instead of playing 1 voicing rhythmically, you can play at least 3 voicings rhythmically, right? And that's what's going on here. It's just that. So we just went from, you know, good old fat shape 1 on the 2nd degree of E flat, and that turns into a first inversion E flat minor triad. And then look how that voice leads perfectly to this chord right here, the A flat 7. What's going on for A flat 7? We've got G flat, we've got C, we've got E natural. So we got flat 7, 3, and flat 13. That's fat shape 3 starting on the flatted 7th of a dominant chord. Listen how juicy that is. That is dynamite, right? And we hear that 2, 5, 1.
right? And so the takeaway here is the fat shapes always keep coming back. Through voice leading, we always return to the fat shapes. Now, the reason why we use the MIDI is because that's how we can achieve maximum clarity. The MIDI is allowing us to ingrain this stuff way faster than without it. Now, it's important to always come back to the fretboard, and so that's what we're going to do, is we're going to go and play some guitar now. We're going to apply these fat shapes on the fretboard, and just kind of keep in mind that what we've done here is we've created a reference point that we can use in our improvisation. We're obviously not going to play this exactly when we're improvising, but what we're trying to do is see, like, okay, for the first chord, we have these 3 voicings we can use. For the second chord, we've got these 3 voicings. For the third chord, we've got these 3 voicings, right? And what I encourage my students to do is just do multiple iterations, right? So like one iteration, you've got, fat shape 1s happening on the D flat major chord, but there's definitely some other approaches you could take here. It's really about just leveraging that compositional approach to see all the possibilities and then getting that on the fretboard, right? You're building out that pipeline in the MIDI, that pipeline of vocabulary, chord vocabulary, lead vocabulary. We do the same thing with melody, right? We do the same thing because the melody is also chord construction, right? Melody is just the notes of chords, but played horizontally instead of vertically. So now that we've mapped out some really great options for just the 2 of us, let's go over to the guitar and start applying them.
Literally. That's 3-6-9 on D flat major. Put the bass note in there. You know what I'm saying? But it's implied though. You don't even necessarily need the bass note, right? And in context, everything aligns because fat shape 1 on D flat major, 3-6-9, goes to fat shape 2 on C7. 3 flat 7 sharp 9. Elegance, the convenience. It all sits on top of rhythm. Rhythm is the focus point. That's why you don't want to get too bogged down by the voicings, right? You literally just don't want to worry about it. I did have a conversation with a student today, Jake, and he did say, I'm not sure I totally hear those chord qualities all the time. And guess what? That takes some getting used to. It does. That's an insane approach for a D flat major 7 sound. I can understand not hearing that, right? It takes some time to get used to, but contextualizing it with your lead line or your expansion, for example, if I want to expand this chord, I can do that by putting a bass note on it, or putting the 5th on top of it, or putting both. The idea is that the fat shape is the core of every chord quality you need. One of those 3 shapes will be at the core of that voicing. Like, check how the C7 sharp 9 expands that fat shape 2, like, just the 3 notes there, right? But then expand it with a flat 13. You can expand it with the 5th. You can expand it with a sharp 11th, right? And I've done that exact same thing in other videos before. I just repeated myself completely shamelessly, but I actually needed to remind people, like, these things are freaking mind-blowing. The whole thing is you can play any melody you want on top of these chords, but also including your own soloing, and that's really where it blows up. It's just these tight little voicings. Like, here's one. Check out the first 2 beats of D flat going into that C7 like this. That's D flat, fat shape 1 off of the major 7th. That's D flat, fat shape 1 off of the 2nd. That's C7 sharp 9, fat shape 2 off of the 3rd. And you literally got that melody. And that's really what it's all about, dude. Like, looking for those top line melodies. Like, you can play stuff like this on D flat. You know what I mean, dude? Incredible. So this is how the guitar unlocks that rhythmic power of the piano with all these complex voicings that in your intuitive mind you're thinking, oh, this must be like so complicated to play on the guitar. No, it's actually easier to play on the guitar than it is on piano, because look what I have to do from F minor to E flat minor via fat shapes. Right? And of course, out of context, that is literally cosmically hilarious. So let's give some context. not like it's like exactly like the most optimal set of notes. That's actually not the point. Because you'll see very quickly some fat shapes are stronger than others. But even that is not something to concern yourself with, because it's more about executing the rhythm or making a stark juxtaposition. And that's what this might be. To get the point of F minor to E flat minor. So I've shown you the entire roadmap to chord fluency, and I'm not saying you're gonna get there on your own. You're definitely gonna need help, and I'm there to help, man. That's what I'm saying, right? Like, welcome to the future, where you can get the best education of your life from a guy on YouTube.